Wiser. This is Christy Bridges, and today we have a double feature because my friend Kelli is back, and I know that you have probably enjoyed her as much as I have enjoyed her. We have been talking about flipping the box. Kelli, what was flipping the box?
Changing your mindset.
Changing your mindset. We get stuck in these boxes and we don't see a way out, a way that anything could be different. And so our behaviors keep us in this box, right? We keep circling around doing the same things and running into the same walls.
That's right.
So Kelli is a professional counselor, and she is here to help us flip that box. And today, what we want to talk about is specifics. So last couple of times we have talked about identifying those places where we're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And today we want to talk about the things that we do in those boxes, the things that we do in those stuck places, and how to address those. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for having me again.
I appreciate you.
No problem.
All right, so Kelli, confession. Last time we spoke, you made me say, we really, really, really need to talk about this thing because it's what I do. So maybe that's selfish of me, but I figure if I do it, somebody out there is also doing it.
Right.
You mentioned obsessive thoughts,
mm-hmm.
and how sometimes we actually comfort ourselves, sort of, trying to believe we have some kind of power when we feel powerless, by continuously having these conversations in our head or rolling this problem around in our head like it's going to miraculously get better if we just put all the pieces in the right places, like a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
Kelli, I do that. How do I not do that?
Well, one of my favorite methods to use is called mind dumping.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when you're just going to take everything in your head and you're going to put it on paper or in a note or voice message or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a form of processing.
It makes sense. One thing I have found when I mind dump is that forcing the chaos to funnel itself out one letter at a time or one word at a time makes it more manageable.
Yeah.
And eventually, especially if I'm handwriting into a journal, my hand gets tired and I get sick of hearing myself fuss. And so I come to an end of it.
Right.
And if it starts up again, I can always pick that journal back up and do that again.
Right.
Now, there are times, though, that it's the middle of the night. And that's when my brain goes haywire because I'm not getting jobs done and talking to people and doing other things, right? Well, it's dark. I'm already in bed. I don't want to get up and pick up my journal and turn on a light. Does it work if I just talk to text?
Yeah. It's just a form of processing. Anything that helps you get it out from here to somewhere else.
Gotcha.
Because I always tell my clients that I want them to do the mind dumping, and then I want them to close the lid on it or shut the power off or, whatever. And you don't have to think about that again until some other time.
Oh, and I like that you say until some other time, right? I'm not making myself false promises. I'm not saying I'm never going to think about this again. Oh, we're done here. The problem is solved, right? That's not the point. What I need to do is give myself a rest in the moment.
Right.
Yeah. So in the chat, I'm going to put a link to a tool I use for that process when it's in the middle of the night and I don't want to get out of bed and go find my journal and turn on a light and whatever. And I reach over for my phone. There's a program I use. I don't get paid to tell you about this, but just like everything, I want to share my resources with you. There's a program I use called Evernote that you can get on your phone and on your computer, your other devices, and you can even keep things in little notebooks. But it helps me to just reach over and go, burger, 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 right? I can even do it with my eyes closed. Now, talk to text is never going to understand my Southern all that well, but I can go and edit it some other time, right? Because the point wasn't
Well, if you're just brain dumping,
Right.
it probably not even matter. That makes sense.
I'm not sending this off to the publisher.
Right.
This is my own private journal. It might be better if nobody can read it.
Exactly.
So does it really help when you get that out? It
Yes.
does, right?
Yes. Yes. I've never had a client come back and tell me that just wasn't helpful.
Right.
You know?
Most of them go, oh my gosh, I actually fell asleep.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of them's like, oh wow. I would not have thought that would have worked.
Yeah.
I was like, but it does.
It does.
It really does. Because, all obsessive thoughts do is they just play over and over and over in your head like a CD on repeat.
Yeah.
So you just need something to change it up.
Totally.
Switch out CDs.
Now, what if your obsessive thought is about a situation with another person? So in my head, sometimes I'll have all these arguments with people that, of course, they don't ever hear.
Right.
Because it's in my head.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I have found, I found that there are very different ways that I can deal with the situation. Once I've gotten it out and I've been able to rest, saying something to that person,
right,
may or may not help. So can you tell me about what makes it helpful versus what makes it really counterproductive?
Let's see. If there's real concern, right? So that's something that's immediate, needs to be taken care of. There needs to be a solution. There needs to be a problem. There needs, an answer.
Right.
Sometimes, like what you say you do, play out conversations in your head. I like to call that role play. And sometimes that's very helpful because you can only assume what the other person is going to say back. You don't actually know.
Right.
But you have a different, a couple of little things going on that you can go, oh, I can pull from that or I can pull from that. And then sometimes when you get it all out and you're thinking about it, you're like, man, this is not true. This is not anything I need to take to this person because this is not happening.
Right.
It's all up here.
It's all up here. Or this is not my business.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Not my responsibility.
Yeah. Sometimes the things we feel the most internal pressure to correct someone on or instruct someone is totally not.
Name two that I know happens all the time.
Yep.
Adult kids with parents.
Uh-oh.
Trying to take on responsibilities that are not their responsibility to take on.
Yep.
And then wives and husbands. Because we like to play their Holy Spirit.
My mother told me once, she said, Christy, you are not your husband's Holy Spirit. I have had to remind myself of that a lot.
Yeah.
But it's probably the best advice she ever gave me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I heard a sermon one time that, women are here to correct men, to keep, not that they do all things wrong.
Right.
But like, we're kind of like their compass. Like, are you sure but you got to go about it the right way. You can't say, I said that we need to do this.
Right. True.
If you're married to my husband, you're getting the exact opposite.
And you have to be willing to accept it also.
Right. Yeah.
Because we are, we're different on purpose.
Absolutely.
And this is not to say that every woman is just like this thing and every man is just like this thing.
No.
But when a woman and a man hook up, they usually connect in a way because of their differences. Because God says, you know what, you need someone to balance you in this direction. And they need someone to balance them in that direction.
And as a marriage counselor, if you look at it, if you have your husband take spiritual gifts test and you take the spiritual gifts test, they're usually complete opposites.
Wow.
But if you look at the marriage as a whole, you have everything you need.
Isn't that nice? Just repeat that. If you look at the marriage as a whole, you have what you need. I disrespected my husband for so long. I did not respect him because he wasn't like me. And I was mistaken. He was exactly who he needed to be.
Right.
to give me the perspective and the motivations
Right.
and the backbone that I needed to have and the peace that I needed to have.
Right.
He
Right.
wasn't supposed to be like me. Beautiful.
My husband keeps me in check as far as like when I have these wonderful ideas, and because I have ADHD and all kinds of other things, I have these ideas. I can't go through with. He kind of keeps me on the guard, and it's like, okay, how are you gonna do that?
So is your husband related to my husband?
Maybe.
I swear that is Richard's number one goal in life, is to keep me from overextending myself, and it is a hard job. He should be paid more.
Exactly.
Oh man.
Exactly.
So one of the things in our boxes, one of the habits that we get ourselves boxed in by, right, and we just go around in circles and bump into the same walls, is that obsessive thinking.
Yeah.
It keeps us from resting properly. It keeps us from thinking clearly.
Yes.
It can actually cause us to become more paranoid, more frustrated, more down on ourselves.
Absolutely.
More judgmental. And none of that is healthy.
To assume a lot.
Yes.
We are constantly assuming what other people are going to say, or how they're going to act, or what they believe, or this or that, instead of just taking it and going, hey, I'm thinking this in my head, or my head is telling me this. Like I always tell my clients to say, the thought I have in my head is, because that lets the person know, hey, I'm not accusing you of this, but this is a thought that's running through my head. And like I was talking to a client the other day, and she was like, just got accepted to med school, doing great, so proud of her. But she was like, I feel like all my friends are mad at me because I'm not hanging out with them. And I was like, what is the reality?
Good question.
And she was like, well, I mean, they're not spending time with me, so I would think that I think that they could be mad at me. And I was like, okay, but really, what is the reality of that thought? They know how hard you tried to get into med school. You got into med school. If they're really good friends, they're not going to think that.
Yeah.
They're going to be so happy, and they understand med school is med school.
Oof. Yeah, there are movies about this, right?
It is demanding.
Yes.
It is hard. I was like, they're just going to be happy that you're happy.
You just mentioned something that made me think of something that I am actively trying to change. She had a feeling, which actually comes down to distance and uncertainty. I feel distant from my friends. I'm afraid I won't have any friends. I feel fear, right? I feel distance. I feel fear. I feel uncertainty about them. But instead of saying I feel and naming the feelings, which you talked about doing previously, she did, like I do a lot of times, and like my husband does too. She jumped to a conclusion about it.
Right.
I feel like my friends are thinking this. And man, this is really hard. I am trying to pause or backtrack and identify the feeling and leave the conclusion in question. Instead of saying, for example, I feel like Richard's going to be mad if I don't clean up the laundry room, right? I can say, I feel a little bit lazy today. I feel a little distance or irritation coming off my husband. I feel concerned about our relationship. And I wonder if I could get away with not cleaning the laundry room today, or if I need to get up and do it, right? Instead of jumping to this conclusion about what he's going to think, or, jumping to conclusion like for him, I felt, when we first started realizing that we needed to pause first before getting to conclusions, he was feeling pressured and crowded because we had suddenly had all these people and animals and everything in our house. And instead of saying, I feel pressured and crowded, he went straight to, I feel like everybody's got to go, and that wasn't actually the solution we ended up with.
Right.
We went to God and said, we need your help with this, but we're trying to stop sooner and go, okay, here's the feeling that I actually have. And the assumption can wait until I ask some questions.
If you took that feeling and you actually asked Richard, and you said, the thought I'm playing in my head right now is that if I don't get the laundry room done, you're going to be upset with me.
Right.
Then he can say, well, why would you think that? Because I'm not going to be upset with you. Are you having a hard day? Or something along that line. Or he will say, Christy, you've been putting this off for 2 weeks, and you promised me it would be done today.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So either way, no fight, no arguing, no constant in your head. You've just figured out what needs to happen without hours and hours of sitting and frustrating with yourself about what's happening, or assuming what is going to go wrong.
What is the right thing to do so practical? We torture ourselves, don't we?
If we just
oh my God.
If we just apply logic.
If we just apply logic. And so I'm going to start with the thought that's in my head is that you might be, or that something might be going on, right?
Or you can say, I feel.
Yeah.
I feel upset, or I feel lazy today, and I really don't want to clean the laundry room.
Right.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Right? So you can say I feel.
Yeah.
But you don't have to assume what's going to happen. As a marriage, I would say probably 80%, maybe even 90% of most disagreements in marital relationships, or in relationships in general, is I assume.
Right.
Because you
instead
don't
of
realize,
I feel a feeling, I feel something I've decided that you feel. Yeah.
Or you blah, blah, blah. Like you already are upset with the person because you're assuming what they're going to say or think. Then that person feels attacked. And then what do? Their defenses come up and they attack back.
And they assume where you're coming from.
Right.
And
yeah, you got two people assuming a lot of stuff is not even happening.
Oh my God.
And so if you can learn to deal with that thought that's in your head and go to the person directly and just say, okay, this happened. The thought I have in my head is this. Yeah. And then they have the opportunity to say, well, the thought is correct, or that's a lie. Yeah. Exactly. Why would you even consider that?
Exactly.
Right?
I love it. And be persistent, right? Don't be a wallflower sitting around thinking, well, if they love me, they'll call, or whatever. Get out there and say, hey, I'm feeling this, or I've got this thought in my head and I want to talk about it.
Right. And 9 times out of 10, the other person hasn't reached out because they're assuming the same thing.
Yeah. Or they're just preoccupied because, their life doesn't revolve around you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we are talking about how to communicate with a healthy manner, right? How to brain dump our thoughts so that we're not obsessing, how to ask a question instead of making an assumption. These are things that it's really helpful to do if you have healthy people in your life. There is a theory that it's funny, I read about in a science fiction or fantasy novel, but it's actually a psychological theory called the crab bucket theory, where when you start to become healthy, when you start to reach for higher goals, when you start to try to leave your destructive situation behind, then you're kind of like a crab trying to crawl out of the bucket to freedom. And all the other crabs in a case like that reach for this crab, trying to climb over him and push him back down.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in an unhealthy environment, an unhealthy community,
Mm-hmm.
or have unhealthy relationships, then that kind of happens. You start to reach out, up and towards freedom. You start to become healthier and stronger, and other people sometimes will pull you back to the dysfunction
Mm-hmm.
that you were previously in.
Right.
They'll remind you of who you are,
Right.
or they just pull you into those patterns that you know so well. So how do you build a healthy tribe? Is there hope for those relationships that by changing your communication, you might be able to actually stop this cycle and keep these people?
Yes.
Really?
Sometimes.
Mhm.
Sometimes no. They are too far gone. They are not interested in changing. They're, it take in
People
order
have to
to
want it,
change,
right?
you have to make a conscious effort to do so.
Right.
And some people are so accustomed, they're so stuck in their box. They got their pillow and their blanket, and they're not moving
Yeah.
from their box.
Right.
That's where they want to stay.
Think they're right. That's where they're comfortable. That's where they feel powerful.
And they will pull anybody down with them because they don't want anybody out of the box either.
Yeah.
Because they don't like change, because they are afraid of healthy relationships. I mean, there's tons of things that could be. But sometimes, if you set boundaries, and you say, you know what, I'm just not going to tolerate you talking to me that way anymore. I'm not talking to you that way.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they will change. If they truly love you, they will allow you to grow and change.
Yeah.
And in order to keep up, they will grow and change too.
I have actually found, now it's been a challenge for me, because learning how not to communicate in dysfunctional ways takes practice.
Yes.
Right? Learning how not to relate in codependent ways takes practice.
Yes.
And when you are communicating with people you have existing patterns with,
right,
it's really hard not to fall into those patterns. But I have found that sometimes when I say, I have noticed that we tend to do this, and I don't want to do that anymore. So I'm going to try this other thing. Sometimes just like having one of those weird conversations where you go, I've noticed this. I don't like it, but I like you. And I'm going to try this. You want to try it with me? Right. And sometimes people actually do. And it can take a few times, right? But they, when maybe I say, my thought is this, help me clarify it. I'm giving curiosity instead of judgment. I'm giving an open-ended question instead of an assumption, right?
Right.
Then I'm showing that I actually do care enough about this relationship to be awkward. Awkward is caring, man. Right?
It is. And you have to have the uncomfortable conversations. Yeah.
Awkward is affirming. I'm saying I care enough about us.
Right. You have to be vulnerable. That is something that most people are not used to, because when we live in dysfunction, when we come from dysfunction, we don't trust people around us. We don't trust with our feelings. They've been trampled on too long. It hurts.
Yeah.
And what I find is that if you can just be vulnerable, then, and stop assuming, just quit assuming, be vulnerable, have the uncomfortable conversation.
Yes.
Then communication is so much better, because you're not assuming what the other person is wanting. Yes. You're being direct, you're being vulnerable, and you're being honest. Isn't that how we're supposed to communicate?
That is how we're supposed to communicate.
And so when we're, and if they don't want to do it with you, if they just insist on being critical, insist on putting you down. They insist on being defensive, and you can't really have a conversation.
Right.
Because if you're being critical, you're being defensive, if you're stonewalling, those 4 horsemen of relationship, if you're doing those things, you're not having a conversation and you're not solving anything.
Right. And if you are talking to someone, let's say you're in a relationship that has been dysfunctional because you both have dysfunctional patterns, and you're starting to learn. Today, we're learning that you can brain dump and get out of the obsessive thinking, that you can ask a question instead of making an assumption,
right,
or a judgment. Well, the other person isn't ready for that, because and so they continue to send you 45 bazillion texts to try to emphasize their point and get you to agree, or they whatever it is, they have the obsessive tendency you're trying to get away from, right? Then yeah, it's possible that brain dumping could help them, but if they're not ready for your advice, that's probably not the time to give it. And suggesting a little space, and honoring when someone else needs a little space can help.
Absolutely.
And it's not saying, it's not the hand, right?
Yeah.
It's not saying, I'm going to ignore you now. It's saying, I don't think this is getting us where we want to be, and let's take a break.
And some people don't like that either.
No.
But the way I put it is, I say, ask for a personal timeout.
Yes.
Say, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling like this is not working. I'm feeling like we're not. So you're not going, like you're not.
You just won't shut up.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not accusing the other person
Right.
of anything, so they don't feel critical or attacked. You say, I need a personal timeout because I need time to process what we have been discussing.
Time to process. I like that.
And so if you do that,
yeah,
then what is the other person going to say? I mean,
no, sometimes they won't quit, but then you're learning more about how much respect you have. Yeah. And a boundary, let's just, for the people who have heard boundaries but haven't seen what they really are, let's just mention a boundary is not, you have to stop this, right? A boundary is, I'm going to go ahead and block my phone right now, or put it in the other room. A boundary is what I'm going to do to protect myself. You don't, when you live in a neighborhood, you don't wait for your neighbor to put up a fence if you want to keep your dog in.
Right.
So a boundary is something you put up to give yourself the kind of space and health that you need.
Yes.
And so it's not a control of somebody else's actions, it's a control of your response to it.
Right. And the boundary is not for the other person to obey. The boundary is for you.
Yes.
So if they start crossing your boundary, then you can say, okay, this is what I'm doing because you are crossing the boundary. You don't even have to say it to them. You just have to say, I'm not going to tolerate this, or this is not the kind of conversation I want to have. And then you exit the conversation. Now, will the other person be pleased? No. Will they like your boundaries? 9 times out of 10.
Right.
Especially if you're in a dysfunctional family and that is what has always been. And you're the one that is like the black sheep and trying to change things. Yeah. That makes a lot of like, you think you're too good for us and this and that and the other. Yes. And they do. They start pulling at you and going, no, you can't have boundaries. You've never had boundaries. I even had one client who said her mother said that having boundaries is not Christian.
Oh, that's not true at all. I did once feel that way because I didn't understand boundaries and I didn't understand Jesus. But Jesus pulled himself away from the crowd to go spend time with God. Jesus, after crowds began following him just because he had fed people with a few
Right.
fish and loaves.
Right.
He confronted them about chasing him for food when
Right.
they needed to be getting the spiritual food.
Right.
He said something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't read that throughout the rest of the Gospels, he started a soup kitchen. You read that throughout the rest of the Gospels, he grew more and more intent on giving people what he had come to give them, what they really needed that they didn't grasp yet.
Right.
So yeah, no, it's funny because I actually used to think boundaries weren't the way I understood them. I didn't think they were.
Yeah. There is even a book out that says that boundaries are not.
Really?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. I came across that because the mother actually quoted that book. And I was like, that's such an odd thing to say. I need to find that. And so I started doing some research, and I did. I found the book that had the quote, and I was like, oh, okay.
I find it interesting when people build entire platforms on
I
dissing other ministries.
Right. I have not personally read that book, so
Yeah.
I can't say that what in it is
Right.
not biblically sound. But one of the things that they were talking about is unconditional love. And so if you love somebody unconditionally, you accept them as they are.
And that is very true. You accept them. You don't necessarily let them come in your house and run your life, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I think when it comes to dysfunctional family and toxic family traits and patterns and behaviors, sometimes you have to separate yourself from that. Maybe not forever, but until you're strong enough that you can have boundaries. Because if not, you're not going to grow because you're going to stay in that same toxicity.
Yes.
They're going to trigger you. You're going to trigger them. It's going to be a back and forth
celebration of everything toxic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you are trying to get free of that, sometimes it requires you to separate yourself.
Yeah.
So you can grow in the Lord, so you can get what you need. Then you can go back and do it in a manner that is loving and kind and not hateful.
Yeah. Jesus loves us unconditionally. God created every single one of us and adores us.
Yes.
But when Jesus was here on earth, walking around in a human body that is limited by 24-hour days and, certain amount of space.
Right.
He addressed thousands of people. He hung out with a dozen, maybe 20-something people. And when he went to pray, he took 3 people. It is wise to grant access to ourselves and the things that keep our lives going only to the people who respect those things.
Absolutely.
and can be a healthy part of that. And that doesn't mean we stop loving others. It just means that we decide how much of their actions are going to affect our actions.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. And, if there's friends that are pulling you back in the box, well, then maybe it's time to get new friends, because the old saying, tell me the 5 people you hang out with and I'll tell you where you'll be.
Right.
Is somewhat true. When you change the people you hang out with to the encouragers and to the lifters and to the people who want the best for you, it's amazing how much your life changes.
Kelly, I thought that was selfish, and I thought that was putting myself into a bubble. But what I have discovered is that we can give to others. We can lift others up if they want to be lifted, right? And we can demonstrate, what healthy is to people who don't yet know what that is.
Right.
But we also need a larger percentage of people in our lives who demonstrate for us what healthy is and who are present for us in good ways, in positive ways. The people we can relax around and have some fun with, or share our issues with, or just encourage one another.
Yeah. Because we are not supposed to be isolated,
Mm-mm.
and we're not called to do nothing but help. That's a good
Yeah.
way to get burnout.
As a human, dysfunction breeds dysfunction if we are not balanced by health.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've noticed,
Mm-hmm.
but I know that it's easy to spend a full 24 hours without working out. But if I put a workout into my day, it's still only half an hour to an hour, right? You know, so it's just human nature to let the lower things
Mm-hmm.
fill our lives if we don't intentionally say, I'm going to be more active. I'm gonna count my steps. I'm gonna work out. I'm gonna do whatever. Well, it's the same thing with our psychological health. If we don't intentionally say, I'm gonna make time for the people in my life who don't actually need me,
Mm-hmm.
but want me.
Right.
I'm gonna schedule time with people who I light up around.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to do that because those aren't the people who are constantly calling and showing up and asking for stuff, you know, whatever.
Right.
I've had to intentionally, just like I care about, you know, my physical body, I have to intentionally care about my spiritual and mental health.
Absolutely. And as a counselor, I really have to do that.
Oh, I bet.
Because I have people that I'm helping all day long every day. And it is very easy. And I know my friends don't mean to, but, you know, well, what should I do about this? Or what should I do about that? And I don't mind.
Like the way I started our conversation today.
Well, right. But there's also plenty of conversations that we've had that has nothing to do with that.
Absolutely.
You know, that has to do with ministry or has to do with just hanging
Stand-up comedy.
Yes. Right. So there's not, you know, it's not a constant pull.
Right.
But then there are people that are a constant pull.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to replenish myself so I can even be strong for the person who needs me. I have to have friends that don't need me, that are there for me and just to hang out with and have fun with and relax and grow and learn things from.
Yeah. You know, that's actually a kind of a box that we can get into is in a relationship, we can become single functional in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And see somebody as just the one thing, the one way that they have impacted our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only thing about them that we notice, and that's the only way that we relate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you know, it actually takes a little care to, you know, if you have somebody in your life that you have been, you know, you've relied on for advice, or you've only worked together on tasks, or you've only talked about your husband problems, you know, whatever. If you have that person in your life that you actually want to nurture a healthier relationship with, then I have found it's helpful to start noticing what they like. And, you know, maybe send them a little text. I saw this sign and it totally reminded me of you. Or I was at Bath and Body Works and this smells just like you. And I wanted to, you know, something you'd like. So I grabbed it. If you start to notice ways to lift people up or get them excited about what they are interested in, then you can actually add to the health of your relationship.
Exactly.
I like that. So let's see. We've talked about obsessive thoughts. So we've talked about the crab bucket and actually nurturing a healthy relationship with people who are willing, and if they're not, with other people, right?
Right.
We've talked about a good balance, having people that you are giving to, but having people that give to you as well, or just put you in a different place.
Right.
And with the people you're giving to, I just have to say one thing. Have you ever had clients who didn't really want help?
Oh yeah.
How effective were you?
Not.
Right.
I mean, not really, because you say we need to do this, or you know, we can talk about all you want to, but if we don't deal with the real problem, you know, what is what is going to happen down the road. Like, I feel like you're going to end yourself back up here if we don't admit that there's,
Right.
other problems. And sometimes they're not ready.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're just not ready.
You talked about a couple who came to see you and they were ready to just call it quits.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, well, you could call it quits and start new relationships with the same problems,
Mm-hmm.
or you can fix the problems you've got. And you had to be clear about the fact that you had something to offer if they wanted that.
Right.
Would you purposely just pour into a bucket with holes in it? Somebody who's not willing to make change.
I can't work harder than what someone else is willing to do.
That's right.
If I do, I'm going to run myself ragged.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, when I first started counseling, this is very common because you're so excited to be doing what you finally have, went to school for to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you're so excited about it and you want to see them succeed because, well, that's a feather in your cap and it also is helping your client.
And you have all these answers.
Right, yes. Right. And just not willing.
Yeah. And that does happen.
And
people think they are
frustrating.
They come because they're looking for someone to agree with them, thinking that they're gonna, that's gonna magically make them.
Right. Or they think if they, talk about really not the problem issues.
Yeah.
That gives them somebody to talk to, yes, but we're not dealing with issues.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to build a rapport and you have to do the talk and not really get to issues for a little while. But eventually,
people don't always know what their issues are.
You're like,
yeah,
okay, we've been seeing each other for this amount of time and it doesn't seem like you're really interested in dealing with the trauma or you're not really interested in dealing with the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to do from here?
Yeah.
And then they have to really think about it. And then what I find more than anything is people who are really not ready to deal with it and we talk about it. And I'm very upfront about it. Like I'll say, these are the steps that I deal with when we have trauma. This is what we do. And this is, how it works. And some people are just not ready to tackle it. And they just won't come back.
And that is not a loss, is it?
No, I used to take it very personally. I used to think, means I wasn't good. And what I have figured out is that I'm not everybody's cup of tea.
No.
I'm upfront. I'm straightforward. I'm very honest. And some people don't like that.
Right. And
I'm okay with that. And I've learned that maybe they need a different method. Maybe CBT is not right for them. Maybe they need EMDR. Maybe they need some other form of dealing with their trauma. And right now, that's the tools I have in my toolbox. So that's the ones I use. I am expanding myself and learning more things and more ways to handle, deal with trauma and different things like that. But, the way that I do it is very effective. I've helped lots and lots and lots of clients. And I can't be upset because personalities are not right. There's all kinds of reasons why you don't match a therapist.
Everybody's at a different point in their journey and has different needs at the moment. That's and right. Some people are right where you are, and some people aren't, and that's not a loss.
No, and with therapy, I try my best. So whatever they come into the office wanting help for is what I try to help them with.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times they don't come in saying they need help with trauma because they don't even know that it was trauma.
Right. Most of the time people come to you with symptoms, right?
Right.
This is driving me crazy, or I, am grieving this thing, or I'm in this relationship and they make me, so mad. And you have to dig a little bit to figure out what's triggering this, what's underlying that.
Right. Right. And sometimes they're not ready to go any further.
Yep.
And that's okay.
It's acceptable.
Yeah, because it's like I was watching this who was it? Jamie Lee Curtis interview.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They were talking about alcoholism and when she decided to finally get help with her alcoholism.
Yeah.
And they said, would you do it over again? If you had to do it over again, would you do it differently? And she sat and she paused and she said, honestly, I wouldn't be ready until I was ready.
Yeah.
And that's true. You're not ready until you're ready.
Now, is that a reason not to try?
No, I don't think so. Because I don't think you know.
Right.
I don't think you always know that you're ready. And if with the right therapist, if you have that right rapport, they will hold your hand as you walk through this journey together and you won't feel isolated and alone. So what you thought was going to be really, really difficult, it's not near as difficult when you have somebody with you.
So true. So true.
So.
And you may not be ready to go all the way, but you may still learn a little bit about yourself. I have since I think my first counseling was when I was 10.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time I had gone through some childhood trauma, and the counselor, wanted to help me deal with that, but I didn't know at that time how it was going to affect me.
Right.
And so I was just like, well, I'm better. Right. And we talked, and it was great counseling, and I learned some coping skills, and I was like, yep, doing just great. Okay, bye. And, when I'm 22, stuff comes up, and I had to deal with it again in a different manner. And throughout my life, different things that I have had to deal with have come out in a little bit here, a little bit there, and it's not necessarily, that I could go back in time and go deal with all of this now to save yourself all this heartache. Now, I think it's wise to get some help so you can save yourself a lot of heartache, right?
Right.
But sometimes we just have more to deal with that we don't know about.
Right. Well,
and it's okay to go back.
Right. Karen Duvall said something the other week that just was astounding for me.
Yeah.
She said, when you're being triggered, that's when God is telling you you need to heal.
Wasn't that good? Oh, Karen Duvall. And I thought,
I was like,
fantastic.
Out of all the therapy that I have done, and all the times I have talked about triggers, that never occurred to me like that.
Oh, just.
And then I was
so
like,
smart.
Oh my gosh, God is taking you through this journey and showing you where your weak spots are. And so when you're being triggered, God is going, hey, let's heal this.
Right?
Let's heal this. And I think that's your body's way of also saying, hey, I'm ready.
Yeah.
So if you're being triggered a lot, then you probably are ready to heal. You just don't know it yet.
Yes. And along the way, you learn things that, each time you try to expand yourself a little bit, each time you try to grow a little bit healthier, you're learning tools. You're equipping your tool belt, right?
Right.
You're for the time when you're going to go even further.
Exactly.
And when you're going to help others.
Yeah.
Because that's what got you into this. It was being able to deal with your own stuff and then being able to help others.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. I'm so glad you do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
So do you have anything else that you'd like to share with folks today about these, dealing with these specific things in this box?
I'd just like to say that if you are being triggered, or if you really feel like you are stuck in a box, don't be afraid to reach out to get some help. Whether it's me, whether it's somebody else, even a friend, even a spouse. It's somebody that you can at least share, hey, I'm dealing with this and I'm thinking I need some help. Because sometimes just getting it out, just allowing yourself to own your truth is all you need to do.
Giving yourself permission
to
get help. And
understanding that needing help is not weakness.
Oh, no.
It is strength. It is recognizing that, hey, this is more than I can deal with on my own. I need somebody to come along with me on this. And a friend, a spouse, a therapist, pastor, teacher, most anybody would be happy to go with you.
Absolutely. And, you made me think of something.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're amazing. If I were coming to you for counseling, I would be so glad. But you mentioned you're not everybody's cup of tea.
Exactly.
I'm not everybody's cup of tea. So if you get help and you don't jive with the first counselor you find, don't decide counseling isn't for you.
No,
find somebody else.
Yeah.
Now,
exactly.
If you found all the counselors in your town and you're not jiving, might be you. But keep trying.
Or if you're in a small town,
yeah,
and you don't want anybody to know that you are going to get help, if you are in a small town and you feel like that there's no way there's confidentiality there, or there's, you don't want to go into an office, there's lots of help online. I work for BetterHelp and I absolutely love it. It's so private. It's so nice. From the comfort of your bed. I've had clients literally lay in their bed and there's like, this is so amazing because I can lay in my bed and be comfortable and just pour my heart out, and then I can lay here and cry afterwards if I need to. It's okay.
Oh, I like
Like,
that.
there's so many opportunities out there, so many online services. Like, there's really no excuse for not getting help today.
Well, God bless you. Thank you so much for being here. And God bless you too. If you want to reach out to Kelli, then we're going to put her link in the chat. If you want prayer, then send me a note at info@onemomentwiser.com or just message me right here because I would love to pray for you. And if you have a story that you think would be great for one of these interviews or the devotional books, then let me know. All right. We'll see you next time. Bye. Girl, it's getting so much